Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special council public planning meeting. We have two planning applications that are being brought forward this evening for information and for public consultation purposes only. There'll be no decisions made this evening. I will also advise that this meeting is being live streamed. Welcome to all of those watching at home on the couch. And audio and video recorded and shall form part of the record, which will be retained in according with the town's retention bylaw. And for more information about that bylaw, you can contact our wonderful clerk's office. I'll now ask Councillor Zanella to provide our land acknowledgement statement for this evening.
Better. The town of Innisfil acknowledges that the town of Innisfil is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. The town also acknowledges that the land is the traditional territories of the First Peoples of Turtle Island, and it is shared between the Anishinaabe peoples of Bosaleya Nation, Chippewa of Rama Nation, and Chippewa of Georgina Island First Nation, and we thank them for their generations of stewardship. This meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people, and as settlers, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. The town acknowledges the forced sacrifices that are the foundation of Canadian society today. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zanella. We'll now go on to approval of the agenda. Could I ask for a mover and a seconder, please, to approve the agenda? Moved by Councillor Dodge, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? That is carried. I would now ask if there's any disclosures of interest, conflict of interest on either of these two items. Seeing none, thank you. That will be noted. Our first item this evening is a proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 1417 6th Line in the town of Innisfil. We'll start by hearing from town staff and our consultant for further planning context concerning the application. Council may have a few questions or comments, and then we'll have the opportunity for public consultation. We will hear first from members of the public here in the council chambers, and then from anyone who wants to speak virtually. All speakers will have 5 minutes to ask your questions or express your comments, then staff or the consultant will respond where possible. If staff are not able to respond this evening, the questions will be answered and addressed in the staff report that should follow. Should anyone need to speak, after everyone's had an opportunity to speak once, if someone would like to speak a second time, please identify yourself, and you'll be provided with additional time. After all members of the public have provided comment, council will receive all of what's said as information. Should any member of the public watching the live stream tonight wish to make a comment, they can email clerk services, and these comments will be provided to council and town staff and taken into consideration before council makes a final decision. You may also be added to the circulation list as an interested party, where you will be kept updated on any future information regarding the item. The email will be listed on the PowerPoint during the meeting and is also available on tonight's agenda that can be found on the town's website. We'll now hear from the town clerk, Ms. Tolma, on how the public notice of this meeting was provided.
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice for this public meeting was provided to required agencies on January 27, 2023, and the notice was circulated to all landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands on January 27, 2023, in accordance with the Planning Act. Corresponding signage was posted on the property on January 27, 2023, as well. Information and materials respecting the application were also posted on the town's Get Involved website.
Thank you, Ms. Toma. Has any correspondence been received by the Clerk's Department concerning the proposed amendments?
Yes, Your Worship. One piece of correspondence has been received in the Clerk's office from Stephen Kirschenblatt, dated February 15, 2023, with several questions concerning the Orbit Sales Pavilion and the Orbit itself. As well, Your Worship, members of the public may provide comment or register their interest regarding this application during this meeting or up until council makes a decision on the application by contacting the clerk's office.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Brandon Correa, Manager of Planning, who will provide a high-level summary of the planning context of the proposed amendment. Mr. Correa.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, and the public. The first item tonight is a temporary use bylaw amending comprehensive zoning bylaw 08013 for the lands at 1417 6th line. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this zoning bylaw amendment application is to permit a temporary sales pavilion for the period of 3 years. So it's a temporary use bylaw. The permitted sales pavilion shall not exceed a gross floor area of 495 square meters and shall maintain a minimum of 18 parking spaces, including an accessible parking space. Next slide, please. So in terms of just context and property details, the subject lands are located on the south side of 6th Line and east of 20 Side Road. The lands are surrounded by agricultural lands to the south, 20 Side Road, and agricultural lands to the west, 6th Line and agricultural fields to the north, and a dwelling and agricultural lands to the east. And the subject lands are approximately 6,746 meters squared, with a frontage of approximately 75 meters on 20th and 95 on 6th. Next slide, please. In terms of assessing the application, there is a planning policy framework, ultimately which will be in more detail at a following technical report. But the application will be reviewed with respect to planning policies as shown on this slide. And I'll just note that pursuant to Section 39 of the Planning Act, the Council of a Municipality may pass a bylaw under Section 34, being the zoning part of the Planning Act, to authorize a temporary use of land. I just want to make that distinguishment from a traditional zoning bylaw, that it's not temporary. Next slide, please. And so staff will review and consider all public, council, and department agency comments, as well as report back through a technical report to a future committee of the whole / council meeting. As well, notice will be provided to all who request a notification and or who has submitted comments or speaks tonight at the public meeting. Next slide, please. And generally speaking, town staff are present tonight to answer any questions of council or members of the public, and feel free to reach out otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Correa. We'll now hear from Katie Hickey, Associate with Boost Fields Incorporated, with further planning context of the application.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will try to keep this brief and not duplicate anything that Mr. Carrera just said, but I would like to introduce myself. My name is Katie Hickey, and I'm a land use planner with the planning firm Boost Fields. And then I also have Oslam Demir here with me today from the Quartel Group. So I'll be giving a very brief overview of the application, which again is for a temporary use zoning bylaw amendment to permit a temporary sales pavilion on the subject site for a period of 3 years. And following the presentation, we'll be available to answer any questions. Next slide. To avoid any duplication, the site is at 1417 6th Line at the southeast corner of 6th Line and 20th Side Road. We're proposing a one-story temporary sales pavilion with parking at the rear. And the purpose of the temporary sales office relates to the nearby residential development to the east. Next slide, please. So this is just an image of the site plan. So the sales pavilion will be a single-story structure with a gross floor area of approximately 495 square meters. The building will be well set back from the 2 street edges and would include 18 parking spaces at the rear of the building. And these parking spaces would be accessed from both 6th Line and 20th Side Road. And then the lands surrounding the temporary sales office would just include a variety of soft landscaping, including perennials, ground covers, grasses, and whatnot. Next slide. So this is a view looking northeast to the main entrance of the building from 20th Side Road. Proposed materials would include precast panels and spandrel glass. Next slide. And then this is just an elevation of the west elevation of the building. And that's kind of the end of the presentation. So again, we're available to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hickey. Are there any questions from members of council? Deputy Mayor Fowler?
Thank you, Your Worship. Under the provincial policy statement, it says at the bottom, the temporary sales office would only be permitted to sell lots and/or units which have draft plan subdivision approval under the Planning Act. To date, nothing has crossed our desks. Nothing has been presented to us personally, email, electronically, otherwise. When is this sales pavilion looking to be put into play? Like how soon, and what exactly is happening with it when you actually do erect such a structure?
Mr. Correa? Or Ms. Lee, whoever wants to answer that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think the applicant was looking to provide a part of the answer, and then I'll probably follow up when they're done.
Thank you. Ms. Hickey?
Yeah, so the purpose of the temporary sales office would support any of the pre-existing approvals for future phases of land subject to a minister's zoning order for those orbit lands to the east.
Did you have anything to add, Ms. Lee?
Yes, so we would be, as Mr. Carrera has indicated, through the staff planning report, we would be analyzing the Planning Act provisions and whether they are complying with the applications. This temporary sales office in terms of approvals for lots that they have available for sale, so we will be addressing that through the staff report.
Follow-up, Deputy Mayor Fowler?
Okay, then that being the case, what is the time frame that we're looking for the erection of the sales pavilion?
Ms. Hickey?
Oslam, do you have anything to add?
Yes. So our intention to start construction of this spring or the summer once we receive all the required permits.
Thank you very much. Councillor Draj.
Through you, Your Worship. I believe the town has went through something like this previously in Sleeping Lion, and it was a temporary structure that ended up becoming permanent, and I believe now it's like a strip mall. What kind of assurances are we going to have that once this pavilion is served its use, that it's going to be taken down?
Who wants to answer that one? Ms. Lee?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, for the question. So there are provisions, as we note in the information report, there is a requirement for an agreement, the sales office agreement, and there would be provisions within that agreement in terms of the temporary nature of that sales office and the requirements in terms of it being that temporary. So we will ensure that's part of the agreement going forward.
Go ahead, Councillor.
So just to be clear, that we didn't have those assurances back when Sleeping Lion was built? That presentation?
Councillor Drudge, I would have to look back at what that agreement specifically said as to whether those provisions were incorporated or not, and I can certainly advise council. I'm not aware at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure that'll be addressed in the staff report. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. One of the great things about the orbit that I liked as a farmer and was that it was going to be high density and we're going to protect agricultural land further out. The core of the orbit it was going to be in circles. We had 400 meters and then 800 meters we're going to develop. So I'm just curious why this development is already starting further than 400 meters from the core, and why we need 95 acres rezoned to build a very small structure at the corner.
Mr. Carrera?
Through the chair, sorry, I'm going to pass that question to Director Lee. Thank you.
I think, Councillor Ices, through you, Mayor Dolan, I'll speak to part of it, and perhaps Oslam wants to speak to another part of it. In terms of the temporary use, it would be applicable to the area of the sales office itself. It wouldn't necessarily be temporary use of the entire 95 acres for the use, because as we've noted, the structure is a certain size, certain parking area. So that would be the area that the temporary use would apply to. It doesn't have to apply to the entire property. In terms of why this specific property, I may let the applicant speak to that.
Go ahead, Oslam.
Hi, this location was originally proposed by the town staff just a year ago when we started this whole process. And then also we wanted the sales office at the core of this major intersections as well, at the 6th line and the 20 side road.
Follow up, Councillor Ices.
So I'm just thinking about zoning around the area. Typically when, from what I understand, when zoning gets changed like this, so what does this have to do with our secondary plan of the town? Does this create the outskirts of where the secondary plan is going to be allocated?
Through the chair, so this will not impact the nature of the secondary plan and would be specific to the sale of units based on the Planning Act analysis mentioned previously and what has draft plan approval and zoning in place.
A further question. So the lands where the orbit will be concentrated, is that still zoned agricultural?
Through the chair, so I believe the lands you were speaking to are subject to a minister's zoning order. Yeah.
But these aren't.
Ms. Lee or Ms. Carrera? Just, I think, looking for some clarity, keeping in mind that this particular planning application is about a temporary use, like as opposed to talking about the entire orbit. If council at some point decides we need a workshop on the orbit proper, we could probably look at doing something like that. But but tonight we're looking at the rezone, a temporary rezone. But I'll ask Ms. Lee to comment.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. And I think that's the distinction that staff are trying to make is this doesn't actually rezone the property, so it remains in the agricultural designation that is on the property. It's a temporary use that allows for the sales office for the 3-year period of time. So it doesn't change the zoning during that time frame. I don't know if that answers Councillor Isey's question.
Yeah, that does help. I guess council and members who were on council last time have quite high expectations about this project, as a lot of people do. And for the first public meeting about it, it just brings questions up right away as to, our intention was the orbit is a big thing. And I agree, this is more of a specific question. So I'll end my comments there.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Can I ask, please, the 3 years, is that because that's what the maximum is for a temporary zoning bylaw?
Yes, Mayor Dolan, the Planning Act is specific in terms of the allowed timeframe, and it is a 3-year timeframe that is permitted under Section 39 of the Planning Act.
But that doesn't mean that in the future that a proponent couldn't come back and ask for an extension, or how would that work?
Mayor Dolan, members of council, there are also provisions for the extension of that for a further 3-year time frame under the Planning Act. And then at that point in time, unless there are Planning Act changes, there would have to be further consideration.
Thank you. We'll now hear from members of the public who have questions regarding the proposed amendment, and I will first call those in attendance here at the town to come forward to the podium, and please state your name for the record. Questions or comments from members of the public? Questions or comments? I'm seeing none. I'll then go to the, it looks like we've had nobody sign up for the pre-registered electronic participation. So we can skip that piece. And I'll go to a final call then for members of the public or members of council for questions and comments. And then I would ask, Madam Clerk, have any of comments been received in your email inbox from the people watching on live stream?
Thank you, Your Worship. And yes, we had an email from Rob Nicol that will be circulated to council and to staff tomorrow morning.
Thank you. We'll now go to the recommendation to receive the comments provided this evening. Can I please have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that's on the board? Councillor Saunders and Deputy Mayor Fowler. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you to everyone who has taken the time to participate in the presentation regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Anyone who wishes to provide comments may still do so and may also register as an interested party to be contacted before this item is considered by council. Please contact the clerk's office at clerksoffice@innisfil.ca. Council wishes to thank everyone for their participation. We'll now move directly into our second public meeting, and I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record because the Planning Act is pretty prescriptive on how these Planning Act applications are heard and public meetings are ran. So our next planning application concerns a proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 2125 Raynor Court. We will first hear from town staff and consultants on behalf of the application. We will then hear from council with any questions or comments they may have regarding the application, and then from members of the public, both here in the council chambers and anyone who is registered to speak virtually. As with the first meeting, speakers will have 5 minutes to ask questions or provide comments. We will now hear from the town clerk, Ms. Toma, on how the public notice of this meeting was provided.
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice for this public meeting was provided to required agencies on January 27, 2023, and the notice was circulated to all landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands on January 27, 2023, in accordance with the Planning Act. Corresponding signage was posted on the property on January 27, 2023 as well. Information and materials respecting the application were also posted on the town's Get Involved page.
Thank you, Ms. Toma. Has any correspondence been received by the Clerk's Department concerning the proposed amendments?
Thank you, Your Worship, and no correspondence has been received, but members of the public are welcome to provide any comment or register their interest regarding this application during this meeting or up until council makes a decision on the application by contacting the clerk's office.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll now hear from Stephen Montgomery, Supervisor of Development Acceleration, who will provide a high-level summary of the planning context of the proposed amendment. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Montgomery.
Thank you. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, staff, and the public. The purpose of this public meeting is to consider an application by Celeste Phillips Planning, Inc. on behalf of the owner, K&K Wilson, for a zoning bylaw amendment to comprehensive zoning bylaw number 8013, which is the town-wide zoning bylaw. Slide, please. So the purpose of this zoning bylaw amendment is the applicant is requesting to rezone an existing residential lot known municipally as 2125 Raynor Court from residential residential 1 or R1 zone to mixed use exception 1 or MU21 zone, which is the existing zoning of the adjacent Home Hardware. The purpose of this is to provide additional storage in association with the Home Hardware on what is now a residentially zoned lot. Slide, please. This aerial photo is from 2022 and shows the subject lands highlighted in yellow that the applicant proposes to rezone from R1 to, as mentioned, the same zoning as the adjacent Home Hardware, which again has an MU21 zone. Next slide. And this is a zoning schedule from the draft bylaw that has been submitted by the applicant showing the actual proposed rezoning of the subject lands from R1 to MU21. Slide. So staff are reviewing this application in the context of applicable planning policies and plans. We have to look at the provincial policy statement, the provincial growth plan, Lake Simcoe protection plan, County of Simcoe official plan, Innisfil official plan, and as well the town comprehensive zoning bylaw 8013 and its regulations. The staff report speaks briefly to these matters a bit further in Attachment 3. Staff note the subject lands are designated downtown, the R1 zoned lot is designated downtown commercial area, which allows commercial uses, including retail. So that's why an official plan amendment would not be required to permit this proposal, but just an amendment to the town's zoning bylaw, a rezoning. Staff are also reviewing this proposal in terms of screening and buffering of uses from existing residential uses. Site plan control would be required in addition to this rezoning to allow the proposed storage uses. A site plan control agreement exists for the existing home hardware. This agreement is from 2013, which was entered into shortly after the site was rezoned in, I believe it was 2011 when it was originally rezoned. And this would have to be, this site plan control agreement would have to be amended. Slide, please. So the applicant will provide more details in their presentation. As stated, there are no decisions to happen this evening. So in terms of next steps, staff will review and consider all comments received and report back to council at a future council meeting, recommending whether the proposed amendment should be approved. And notice would be provided respecting when this report is returning to council for consideration to all that requested notification and/or submitted written correspondence for this public meeting, and that includes any correspondence as well on the town's Get Involved Innisfil.ca website where the materials are posted. Next slide. I'm filling in for Chris Cannon. Unfortunately, he's sick this evening. But this is the contact information for Chris Cannon, who's the planner associate with this file, and we're open for questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you for filling in, Mr. Montgomery. We'll now hear from Celeste Phillips of Celeste Phillips Planning Incorporated with further planning context of the application. Hello, Ms. Phillips.
Bingo. Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, members of staff, and members of the public. My name is Celeste Phillips. I'm a land use planning consultant. I'm here to present the application. My presentation is quite short. I did want to introduce to you, though, the owners of the property, Kelly and Kevin Wilson, who are here this evening, as well as their legal counsel, Marvin Geese, to my right. We can go to the next slide, please, and can go through these probably quite quickly. So the property is located in Alcona on the north side of Innisfil Beach Road, west of the 25th Side Road. And as Mr. Montgomery has mentioned, the purpose of the application is to allow for the expansion for the Home Hardware Building Supply Center to allow for additional storage. Next slide, please. So this slide is an air photo showing the two properties that we're talking about this evening, although the smaller rectangular area in yellow is the one that is the subject of the rezoning. The larger property is occupied by the hardware store. The requested rezoning is for that yellow rectangular area consisting of about 1/3 of an acre. And it is currently developed with a single detached residential dwelling. And the next slide, please. The property is located in Alcona, and by way of the County of Simcoe official plan, Alcona is designated as a settlement area. The blue star on this slide shows the approximate location of the property that we're talking about this evening. So the property is located within the built boundary of Alcona. The next slide shows the designation of the property in your official plan. So the red striped designation represents the area in your official plan that is known as the downtown commercial area. So what's interesting in this case is that both all of the properties on the south side of Raynor Court are already pre-designated for downtown commercial use, but the zoning of those lands remains a residential single-family. So the smaller blue box on this property is the piece of property that we would like to have rezoned to allow for commercial uses. But with the lands already being pre-designated as a downtown commercial designation, there is an expectation that at some point in the future, all of those lands will be zoned for commercial purposes. Your official plan has several objectives that promote development, commercial development in this area, and certainly indicate that this should be a focal area for the settlement area of Alcona. And the next slide shows the current zoning of the property. So this shows the larger red outlined area is the existing hardware store. The smaller piece is the one that is the subject of the rezoning application. And I would just point out to your attention the 5 lots along the south side of Raynor Court that are all zoned residential now. They are the ones that are designated commercial in your official plan. Next slide, please. And we can probably skip through this because Mr. Montgomery has indicated the rezoning request. The storage expansion area is shown on this slide. Currently, there are between 55 and 60 employees at the hardware store. As you know, the Building Supply Center has existed for over 40 years and is in desperate need of additional lands for storage purposes. So the enactment of a rezoning bylaw to change the zoning of that property would implement your official plan designation and is in conformity with the official plans for both the County of Simcoe and the Town of Innisfil. And I do have a few photos, and then I will turn it back to you, Mayor Dolan. Next slide. So this is the location of the storage expansion area. The next slide. Same thing. And then this is still showing the expansion area. And then the last slide, this is a slide of the house at 2125 Raynor Court that's owned by Kevin and Kelly Wilson. Next slide, please. And this is a rear entrance to Raynor Court, but I'm advised that by way of the site plan agreement, that this entrance cannot be moved can't be used for the movement of materials into the property. And that completes my presentation, Mayor Dolan.
Thank you very much, Ms. Phillips. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Ices?
Thank you, Worship. Not really a question, just a comment. I'd like to commend the Wilsons on expanding their hardware store. Like the presenter said, 40 years is a long time, and the economic development that we need in Innisfil, it's great when it comes from the people that live there, and that I know your heart and soul are here, so I really appreciate your investing further in the town. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ices. Councillor Richardson?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Actually, on behalf of Councillor Waters, who was unable to attend, he asked me to just ask about, he said that he received lots of complaints before and to talk to bylaw, and so was wondering if there was any setbacks or privacy barriers into the rezoning request.
Ms. Phillips or Mr. Montgomery, whoever wants to answer.
Through you, Mayor Dolan. Yes, there exists currently a closed board fence on the east side of the property. There is that fence and gate that I showed you in the photo at the rear of the property. And then there's, of course, the house that faces Raynor Court. So I'm not sure if there's anything in addition to that that you were expecting, or Councillor Waters, perhaps.
I think they're referring to the east boundary, the boundary between to the house to the direct east?
I'm just going to check with the Wilsons. I understand there's a closed board fence along the east boundary of the parking area. I also think there's a fence along the east side of the expanded area. Is that correct? Yes, I'm getting a yes.
Thank you. And on Google Maps, it looks like there's a number of trees there as well. Is that it? Okay, Councillor Zanella.
Thank you, Your Worship. Is there going to be a structure built on that property?
Not that I'm aware of. Again, the Wilsons have advised me that they need it for storage purposes, so at this time, no immediate plans for a structure, no.
All right, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Fowler.
Thank you, Your Worship. What is the potential future of the house as a house? Because on the report, you can see the segregation of the storage area and then the home itself. Is the home set for demolition? Is it going to be left alone? What is the future plans for it?
Through to the Deputy Mayor, it's my understanding that there's a family member living in that house, and I think at some point that may not be the case and the house would be demolished. Is that correct?
Thank you. Any other questions of members of council or comments? Seeing none, we'll now hear from members of the public who have questions regarding the proposed amendment. I'll first call those in attendance here at Town Hall to come forward to the podium, and please state your name for the record. If you'd be so kind as to push the button till the red light comes on. There we go.
Good evening. My name is Megan Atkinson, and I live at 2129 Raynor Court, directly next to the property in question. So my partner and I have now been living in Innisfil for almost 2 years. Coming from a significantly busier area, we were drawn to the quiet, rural community of Innisfil. When we first set our sights on 2129 Raynor Court, we were obviously aware that the Home Hardware was located on the other side of the fence. That was distance that we were comfortable with. Prior to putting an offer on the house, I was sure to call the town to check on the zoning of the surrounding properties. I was told that the properties around me were zoned residential, and so we proceeded with the purchase of our very first home. I would also like to add that through using the Innisfil Interactive Zoning Bylaw Map, 2125 Raynor is also labeled as being zoned R1, which we have seen here tonight. Fast forward 6 months later, my partner comes home on Wednesday, October 6th, and calls me to say that our neighbor has cut down all of the beautiful mature trees in his backyard. And things progressed very quickly from there. Every day I would come home from work, agitated at the mess that was now the backyard of 2125 Raynor. Friday, October 15th, I put in my third call to the town to tell Caroline about the pre-existing fence dividing Home Hardware and the backyard of 2125 Raynor now being totally removed. The old fence was now put up between our properties. I was told that nothing could be done until something starts being built or until they start driving their hardware equipment back there for commercial use. On Wednesday, October 20th, we came home to see barbed wire on top of the finished fence and what used to be my neighbor's backyard, now full of Home Hardware machinery. Calling bylaw had now become a part of our regular routine, as it seemed we were not getting any answers, nor was anything changing. We were under the impression that Innisfil was a town committed to preserving the natural landscape, and here it was being destroyed without question in our own backyard. Something that's very interesting to me about this meeting today is how we were repeatedly told that the fence line is a civil issue, and clearly, by virtue of us being here today, it is much larger than that. When I look outside now, instead of seeing leafy maple and oak, I see mini excavators and wood chippers. Over the course of this whole ordeal, our bylaw case has been taken on by several different officers. At one point, the case was closed without us being notified and with zero resolution. I was told by one of our initial officers, Erica, and the customer ambassador, Joji, that machinery should not be stored on the residential side. I would like to reiterate that since October of 2021, machinery such as mini excavators, wood chippers, flatbed trucks, and backhoes continue to be stored in the backyard of 2125 Rainer, despite it still being zoned residential. I feel that it is relevant to mention that I'm a teacher, which means that I'm off for the months of July and August. Having this additional time at home means that I'm able to directly observe the commercial activities taking place in what used to be the backyard of 2125 Rainer. Seeing as Home Hardware stores much of the commercial equipment to rent, there are often vehicles pulling up on the tarmac where my neighbor's backyard once was. I like to spend as much time as possible outside, but having these commercial activities 100 meters closer than they should be has somewhat ruined that enjoyment for me. Perhaps my partner and I would not have made the decision to move to Innisfil had we known that Kevin Wilson would devastate our property value only 6 months into living there. I'm still shocked that despite our continual calls to bylaw, there was zero effort on the part of the town to put a stop to any of these activities. I cannot tell you how frustrating and exhausting this experience has been and how vehemently opposed I am to the rezoning of 2125 Rainer. We're here today because Kevin Wilson is asking for permission after it has already gone through. And should he be granted permission after making zero attempt to follow the proper channels, I fear that this will set a dangerous precedent. I would also love to know, if my prayers are answered and the rezoning is not permitted, what remediation will be taken, seeing as Kevin has already taken it upon himself to effectively rezone the residential property for the convenience of his business. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my story with you this evening, and I hope that your decision means that I can go back to loving where I once live, or where I live once again. Thank you. I also have documentation of every bylaw call that I've made over the past year. So this USB is yours if you would care to review it.
Thank you. I'm sure the clerks will take that for you, and thank you for your comments, Ms. Atkinson. Is there anyone else in attendance that would like to speak? Thank you, and please state your name for the record.
Hi, thank you. My name is Harrison Gazuli. I also live at 2129 Rainer Court, right beside the property in question. Ultimately, we're here to oppose the zoning amendment and to assess if what has already been done to the property in question is even lawful. Many times it's been stated that they want to rezone this for storage. But as referenced in your bylaw 080-13, section 3.34, subsection B, says no outside storage shall be permitted in the front, side, or any yard that abuts a residential zone. Not only is this already being used, I'm not sure if you could tell, but those pictures from the consultant's slideshow actually show that the border, the outside border of the residential zone has already been moved by way of the fence line. It has been inverted and the vast majority of the backyard has been paved over. There are no trees on that yard. There's no grass in I'd say 60% of the backyard. It's asphalt. There's probably, I'd say 20 riding lawnmowers there, all in boxes. 4 mini excavators, there's bobcats, there's tons of machinery just sitting there, not being used, not being moved. They said they've got 50 employees. You could probably get all 50 of them riding on a lawnmower back there. It's an eyesight, an eyesore, as well as the noise pollution and physical pollution that these vehicles could be dripping and running off onto my property now because there's only asphalt there. It's been over a year that this has already happened. I understand that we're here to talk about it now, but this has already been done. If you're to go on that property today, the fence line is moved, it's paved over, and it's just really unsettling knowing that you can beg for forgiveness, but you're not asking for permission at this point. It's being done. The main goal in this point is, if this is allowed, what restitution are we going to get? Because our house is right there. It's our main investment. All of our money went into this, and we want to protect that investment. When we have Home Hardware that's going to be driving trucks right next to our house, they're going to demolish the house in a few years, and then what? When does my front driveway become, the new entrance for Home Hardware, and people park their cars on Raynor Court? It's already an issue with people parking for the summer in trying to get down to the beach, but who knows what could become even worse if this is allowed to go through. So ultimately, I don't think that it's being looked into properly to this point, and maybe they should see that if what is currently going on is even allowed, because it seems to me that your bylaw states it should not and is not allowed to be used for outdoor storage. With that, that's all I have to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Next, any other members of the public wish to come to the podium? Thank you, and please state your name for the record.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Marvin Geist. I'm the solicitor for the applicant. First of all, and it's very important to realize that the town passed its official plan designating Alcona as its growth center many years ago. And part of that official plan designates this property and 5 other properties, including the neighbor, commercial. It's commercial, and at the time, the town ought to have passed a zoning bylaw to go along with it, but it did not. As a matter of fact, in 2011, when Mr. Ross Cotton was your planner, my client submitted an application for the rezoning of its lands, but it sat in abeyance up until this year, for one reason or another. With respect to our neighbor's problem with access and alleging that trucks will be coming on Raynor, the only access to the hardware store is on the Innisfil Beach Road, and that is the only access to the property. The picture of the gates in the back of the property, that was part of the site plan agreement that I did many years ago. And that is for emergency purposes only. Access is on or from, ingress and egress is only from the Innisfil Beach Road. With respect to cutting down trees, when one has a private property in this town, a small private property, residential or commercial, there is no tree cutting bylaw. There is a county tree cutting bylaw, but that's with respect to a larger property. So anyone can cut down a tree on one's lot. This is not the city of Toronto. Further, with respect to the fencing, we created or established a new fence up against the property, which hides the existing open storage. So we've looked at that, and we invite you to attend on the property and see what we've done. When our neighbors bought their property, they ought to have seen through their solicitor or themselves that the lands, again, were zoned or designated commercial. Their lands are designated commercial and zoned residential. They're very fortunate that they have that, 2 designations, because at a later date, their property, I suggest to you, will be worth more money than it is now. Because should a new plaza go up to the east of our existing property, then those lands are even more valuable because they have the depth to establish a new development on that site. So I think I've answered many of the questions or issues that they have raised. If you have any other issues, please do not hesitate to ask me.
Thank you, Mr. Geist.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to come to the mic to ask a question or make a comment? Yep, you can come up for a second time.
Hello again. I think my greatest issue is the fact that we are here to discuss the zoning of 2125 Rainer. However, it has effectively already been rezoned. So the entire process is for nothing. If you go to that property, and I invite you to step foot in my backyard as well, and to see that this machinery is not hidden. The fence that was erected does not effectively hide anything that's been done. And this meeting should have come before anything was done in the first place. So that is my greatest issue, is that I didn't get to voice my concern prior to anything happening. What is democracy if we're not here to exercise our rights? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. Anyone else who would like to? Mr. Geist, everybody gets 2 turns, okay?
2 turns? Okay.
2
I'll
turns
make
and
it
you're
short.
done.
I must bring to your attention
We really need to invest in a new mic there. Mr. Geese, you need to speak into a mic because of the live stream.
Sorry about that. Okay. I don't have the order of events with me. It's probably in my file. But I would bring to your attention that when we were advised that we were in breach of the zoning bylaw this summer, we retained Celeste Phillips to be our planner, and we immediately submitted the appropriate application. So we haven't flaunted any of your laws whatsoever. And I can show you the dates, or you can confirm that with Mr. Cannon or with Mr. Kinsella. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to come and make a comment or ask a question? Whenever you're ready, Mr. Guzuli.
Thank you. I'm not too sure if green space allowance is also a thing here. I know that where I previously lived in the town of Richmond Hill, it was. In my belief that I think it's a good bylaw to have in place or guidelines, because when you start to take away all this green space of what is a currently residential R1 property, as was shown on all of the slides, when you start to take that away and put down asphalt and pavement, it doesn't matter if you've cut down trees or anything, but you're starting to take away from the natural beauty of the land and the town. As well, it is really important to know, if you look at the slides, if I could see one up again, I could show you that the residential R1 land, there's, I'd say 40% of that is gone and has already been given to Home Hardware. Their storage, or their equipment is on that land being used as storage right now. So if you're allowed to do that on a residential zone, that's great, but from what I understand, you're not. They've been in violation of this for I'm not sure how long, and there's been no fines or anything to come upon them. It just doesn't seem that it makes any sense that they are using it for storage right now. And it just doesn't seem that it's something that is allowed, nor has it been any fines or opposition to this has been made. It's a residential lot, and it shouldn't be used to store all that equipment. Not to mention, they also repair a lot of equipment there. So on the actual property of Home Hardware, there's maybe 20, 30 push-on lawnmowers that have just been sitting there since we bought the house. I believe that's something that, a dilapidated machine can't just sit there for years on end, rotting into the ground. But once again, not much has been done about that. The fence line is there. It was moved, so sure, you can say that it poses a barrier. However, it doesn't stop any of the noise, dust, dirt. And if you stand on one of the trees on my property that was cut down while that happened, you can see right into the backyard. Everything is there, just sitting on 2125 Raynor Court in the backyard. The fence was moved. It doesn't really justify a zoning amendment, but realistically, that's what they have done by moving the fence line already without asking or without getting permission to change that zoning. So it seems that this is more of a formality at this point, that it's already been done. The house isn't demolished yet, but if we wait long enough, maybe it will be. So I just want to know when it stops. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else that hasn't spoken that would like to speak?
One more time. I just want to reiterate, just so that the speakers know, that their property is designated commercial. My clients' lands are designated commercial. So the principle of these lands all being commercial at some point is established in your official plan. That's the long-range document that shows that Innisfil Beach Road and this part of Alcona will be commercial on the north side of Innisfil Beach Road, including their property. So I think that point can't be overlooked, that the intent is that all of these lands will be zoned commercial. And so the application that's before you is the first one, that may be one of 4, 5, or 6, or however many lots there are. But this is an application to rezone the land to implement what your official plan expects for these lands. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Anyone else? Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry for the awkward mic.
That's okay.
State your name for the record.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Marcel Gazuli. I'm father of Harrison Gazuli. Am I allowed to speak or address you?
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your patience. I only have one question, really, to the committee. If this, in fact, all of these homes that have been built, if it's true on commercial land, that would mean that any decision you make will affect every house next to Harrison and Megan's. So it's not just one small change. This is going to affect the lives of many residents. Please keep that in mind.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else have any comments or questions? Ms. Thoma, did we have anyone pre-register from the public to speak?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, we do not this evening.
And Ms. Thoma, did we have anyone who sent us email comments on this item from since we've been talking?
Thank you, Your Worship. And no, we have not received any correspondence or email regarding this item.
Thank you. We'll now go to the recommendation to receive the comments provided this evening. And can I have a mover and a seconder? And does council have any further comments or questions? Mover and a seconder first, please. Deputy Mayor Fowler and Councillor Constantine. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you to everyone who has taken the time to participate in this presentation regarding the proposed Innisfil Beach Park Implementation Plan. That's not right. I'm reading the wrong note. Thank you for the presentation. Where did I go? Anyone wishing to provide comments may still do so and may also register as an interested party to be contacted before this item is considered by council. Please contact the clerk's office at clerksoffice@innisfil.ca. Council thanks everyone for their participation, and we will now go to the confirming bylaw for tonight's special council meeting. Could I have a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw? Councillor Saunders, Councillor Drodge, all those in favor? That is carried. And then we will go to adjournment at 7:28 p.m. Councillor Richardson, Councillor Drodge, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everybody, for your participation, and please make sure to get your questions and comments in, if you haven't already, to the planning department. Thank you. Good